welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be tackling a topic that I think a lot of us have experienced.
Oh, yeah.
And that is what happens when all of the pressures of academic research sort of come to a head.
Right.
And create almost like a perfect storm of bad incentives.
Yeah.
So we're diving into this Journal of Management Studies article, and they call it the Irresponsible Research Perfect Storm.
Oh, wow.
So have you ever felt that in your own work, that pressure to publish, to get ahead in your career, to make a difference in the world? But it all feels a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah, I think the authors of this article use a really powerful image when they compare it to the film The Perfect Storm.
Right.
You've got these different forces at play, the need to publish, career pressures, even that genuine desire to make a difference. And they collide in a way that really threatens the quality and integrity of the research itself.
Yeah. And it's not just a catchy title.
Right.
They actually break down the specific factors that are fueling this storm.
Yeah.
One that comes to mind immediately for me is the pressure to publish in those top-tier journals, those A journals.
Yeah.
It's like this bottleneck where only certain types of research get through, and it can lead to researchers maybe cutting corners or focusing on what's trendy instead of what's really important.
Yeah. It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Exactly.
And when that happens, you end up with research that's not replicable or useful in the real world.
Yeah, and they talk about other things too, like inconsistencies in how research is evaluated, even editorial burnout.
Oh, yeah.
You imagine.
I can only imagine being an editor swamped with submissions,
Right.
trying to make these fair and thorough decisions,
Right.
while also managing your own research.
And teaching.
And teaching. Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster.
It is, and this is where it gets really interesting for me.
Okay.
They introduce this concept called the research gap.
Okay.
It's like the practice gap we often hear about.
Yeah.
Where academics and practitioners are out of sync.
Right.
But instead of it being academics and practitioners, it's academics themselves.
Interesting.
They're producing all this knowledge, but are they actually using it to run their own institutions, their journals, even their own careers?
That's a really good point. It's almost like a doctor giving great health advice but not following it themselves.
Yeah.
The article points out that we have all these brilliant theories about leadership and decision-making and organizational change. But are those theories reflected in how we manage academia itself?
And that disconnect, that's what they're calling the research gap.
Yeah.
It's a pretty thought-provoking idea.
Yeah, and it's not about pointing fingers or anything. It's just about recognizing we have a responsibility to address these challenges.
Right.
That's where I think their recommendations become really interesting. They don't just say fix it.
Yeah.
They offer these concrete steps. And one thing that struck me is their emphasis on collaboration.
Yeah.
They argue that tackling this perfect storm requires this multi-stakeholder approach. It's not just researchers, it's universities, journals, publishers. Everyone needs to be part of the solution.
And they use strategic congruence theory to explain this.
Right.
Which is basically the idea that everyone involved in the research process needs to be rowing in the same direction, working towards a shared vision of what good research looks like and how it should be valued.
Yeah. We're all in the same boat here. We got to make sure it doesn't sink.
Exactly. So they're calling for a system-wide change.
Yes.
Not just these little individual tweaks.
Right.
And they outline 4 key areas where action needs to be taken. The first one focuses on promoting a shared vision and accountability.
Okay.
And to do this, they suggest creating a governing body,
Interesting.
but not a top-down hierarchical one.
Okay.
More like a group of leaders from universities, journals, funding agencies, all coming together as equals to define what good research looks like and how to achieve it.
So it's a very collaborative approach.
It is. It's a pretty radical idea.
Yeah, but the potential benefits, I think, are huge.
Oh, yeah.
If you imagine a research ecosystem where everyone is working towards the same goals, where incentives are aligned and there's shared accountability,
Right.
it's a big challenge. But I think it's a challenge worth tackling if we want to create a more responsible and impactful research landscape.
Yeah, it's about shifting the culture, not just putting Band-Aids on the problems.
Right.
So that was their first recommendation,
Okay.
shared vision and accountability. Let's dive into the second recommendation in part 2 of this deep dive.
The second recommendation really gets to the heart of how we define success in academia.
Yeah, it's about expanding what we consider scholarly impact.
Yes.
Right now, the system is kind of obsessed with A journals, those prestigious publications
Yeah.
that everyone's chasing after.
Right.
But what if we broadened our definition of impact?
Yeah.
What if we valued research that tackles real-world problems, even if it doesn't end up in a fancy journal.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that impact can take many forms. It could be a study that influences policy,
Yeah.
a project that helps a community, even a piece of writing that sparks a public conversation.
Right.
The article even mentions using things like tenure and promotion decisions to encourage this broader view of impact.
Oh, wow.
Instead of just counting journal publications,
Yeah.
what if universities considered the real-world relevance and contributions of a scholar's work?
That would be a huge shift.
It would.
It's like saying, hey, we value research that actually makes a difference.
Yes.
Not just research that gets you bragging rights.
Exactly. And it ties into this idea of social information processing theory,
Yeah.
which basically says that we're influenced by the cues and signals around us.
Uh-huh.
Right now, the signal is loud and clear, publish in journals or perish.
Right.
But what if we sent a different signal?
Yeah.
What if we said, solve problems, engage with the public, make a real-world impact?
Yeah.
That could change the whole game.
It really could. It's like rewiring the system.
It is.
Changing the incentives so that researchers are encouraged to pursue work that's both rigorous and relevant.
And it's not just about individual researchers either. It's
Yeah.
about institutions embracing this shift as well.
Yeah.
Universities need to create an environment where this kind of work is valued and rewarded, not just tolerated.
Right. So we've talked about shared vision and we've talked about expanding impact.
Right.
What's next on the list?
Well, the third recommendation takes a more practical turn.
Okay.
It focuses on supporting those poor, overworked journal editors we talked about earlier.
Yes, those folks are under a lot of pressure.
They are.
They're the gatekeepers of research.
Yeah.
The article actually draws on a couple of theories here.
Okay.
Conservation of resources theory and work design theory to explain why editorial burnout is such a big problem.
It's like, imagine an editor's energy and attention as a limited resource.
Okay.
If they're constantly bombarded with manuscripts, making tough decisions, dealing with deadlines,
Yeah.
that resource gets depleted.
Leading to burnout and potential errors.
So it's not just about being nice to editors.
All right.
It's about recognizing that their well-being is crucial to the integrity of the research process itself.
Exactly. And the authors offer some pretty concrete solutions.
Okay.
They suggest things like demand forecasting systems to help journals manage the flow of submissions,
Interesting.
kind of like predicting the weather for research papers.
I like that.
They also talk about providing editors with access to stress management resources.
Yeah,
Because let's face it, editing an academic journal is a high-pressure job.
it is. It's like they're saying, let's take care of the people who are taking care of the research.
Right, and it highlights the interconnectedness of the research ecosystem.
Uh-huh.
We can't just focus on individual researchers or institutions.
Right.
We need to support the entire system if we want it to function effectively.
Absolutely.
Ro-
Okay, so 3 down, 1 to go.
Yeah.
What's the final recommendation for quelling this irresponsible research perfect storm? This one focuses on, I think, the heart of it all, the researchers themselves.
Okay.
The authors argue that we need to strengthen the knowledge, skills, and abilities of scholars, particularly at the doctoral level.
Okay.
It's about equipping them with the tools and mindset to produce rigorous and responsible research.
So it's not just about teaching them how to run a regression or write a literature review.
Right.
It's about instilling a deeper understanding of research ethics and best practices.
Exactly. They talk about developing what they call a multi-method mindset,
Okay.
where researchers are encouraged to think critically about how different methods can be used to strengthen the validity of their findings.
So instead of just throwing a bunch of methods at a problem,
Right.
it's about thoughtfully integrating them to create a more robust and trustworthy body of evidence.
And they specifically highlight the importance of constructive replication methodology.
Okay.
It's not just about replicating a study to see if you get the same results.
Yeah.
It's about building on existing research, testing the same ideas in different contexts with different methods, maybe even different populations.
So it's not about discrediting previous research,
No.
but rather about refining and expanding our understanding.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that science is an iterative process, a constant quest to get closer to the truth.
All right, so we've got a pretty comprehensive set of recommendations here.
We do.
Shared vision, expanding impact, supporting editors, and strengthening researcher skills.
Yeah,
It's a lot to take in,
it is.
but I think it provides a really helpful roadmap for navigating this irresponsible research perfect storm.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to remember this isn't just about fixing problems in academia.
Right.
It's about ensuring that the research we produce is trustworthy and beneficial to society as a whole.
Because at the end of the day, research is about making a difference,
Yes.
about improving lives, about understanding the world around us.
Absolutely.
And if we want research to truly fulfill its potential, we need to ensure that it's conducted responsibly and ethically.
Well said. I think that's a great segue to our final thoughts in this deep dive.
Okay, so we've been talking about this irresponsible research perfect storm.
Yeah.
And some of our listeners might be thinking, well, what does this have to do with me? I'm not an academic.
Right. That's a fair point.
Yeah.
But I think the reality is that we all rely on research in some way, even if we don't realize it.
Yeah.
Think about the health choices you make, the products you buy, even the news you read.
Uh-huh.
So much of that is influenced by research, whether it's a study on the benefits of exercise or an analysis of a new technology.
It's like research is the invisible foundation of so much of our lives.
Exactly. And that's why this irresponsible research perfect storm matters to everyone.
Right.
If the research that we're basing our decisions on is flawed or biased or just plain wrong, it can have real-world consequences.
And that's where the research gap is really concerning. Because if academics, the people who are supposed to be the experts in research, are sometimes falling short of their own standards, what does that mean for the rest of us?
Right. How do we know what to trust?
Right.
It's a challenge for sure.
Yeah.
But I think this article gives us some valuable tools for navigating this complex landscape.
Okay.
It's about being more critical consumers of information. Don't just accept things at face value.
Right.
Ask questions, consider the source, look for evidence.
Yeah.
And remember, even the best research has limitations.
We need to develop our own BS detectors when it comes to research.
Absolutely. And I think that's where those 4 recommendations that we've been discussing become really powerful.
Yeah.
They're not just about fixing problems in academia.
Right.
They're about creating a system where responsible research is the norm, not the exception.
Uh-huh. And that benefits everyone.
It does.
So it's not just up to the researchers to get this right.
Right.
It's a collective effort. We all have a role to play in demanding better research, supporting those who are doing good work, and holding those who cut corners accountable.
It's about creating a culture where integrity, rigor, and relevance are valued above all else.
It is well, expert speaker. I always enjoy these deep dives.
Me too.
And this one has been especially thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Any final words of wisdom for our listeners as they go forth into this world of research and information overload?
I would say stay curious, but temper that curiosity with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to ask tough questions, challenge assumptions, dig deeper. Remember, the best way to combat bad research is to be an informed and engaged consumer of good research.
Beautifully said. Stay curious, be skeptical, and keep asking questions.
Yes.
That's a perfect note to end on.
It is.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, expert speaker.
My pleasure. Always a great conversation.
And to our listeners, thanks for diving in with us.
Yes.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep quelling those irresponsible research storms.